So, a very big welcome, everyone, this evening to Pennine Ham Amateur Radio Club, and a very big welcome to Mike VA3MW, who's our speaker tonight. And very, very pleased to see people tonight, and hope you enjoy Mike's points he's going to make to us tonight. Setting up an HF remote station is something a number of us have talked about for I was going to say a few months, one or two of us for a year or so, thinking about the possibility of radio clubs possibly collaborating together and using facilities of one club that might be better than another to share a facility that members of those clubs in the localities that sign up to it could use. So it's something that, one or two people have given some thought to. We've never acted on it, but it would be definitely something worth thinking about. So we've got Mike at VA3MW to give us a presentation about that as well. And Mike, of course, works for FlexRadio, so I'm absolutely certain the FlexRadio is going to appear in his presentation at some place, which is absolutely fine. But of course, with the development of the modern amateur radio transceivers, there are more of them now with network servers built into them that would facilitate access over the internet in a more straightforward way than might have been done 5 or 10 years ago, before we had the SDR and the computerized, if you like, hub of some of the amateur radio equipment we've got around. So that's me by way of introduction. I'm going to hand the microphone over to you, Mike, and let you take it away.
Well, thank you, Nick, and everybody can copy me okay. Thank you for having me. And today's presentation is very similar to one I've delivered at Dayton Hamvention, and I believe the Orlando Hamcation Hamfest, although it's modified every time. I tried to make it vendor agnostic. It turned out to be a pretty hard trip, and you'll understand why near the end. Throw questions in the chat. I'll fit them in as I read them. I'll keep an eye on it. And I'm going to share my presentation here, and Zoom on a Mac does weird things when you start a presentation, like make everybody go away. So just let me get you all back so I can see who's asleep or not, and we'll get forward. So my name is Mike. I'm VA3 Mike Whiskey. I am actually also brand new Kilo Echo 2 Echo Alpha Foxtrot. I wrote my general. I was in the States a few weeks ago, and I haven't written an amateur radio exam in 49 years. I did it cold turkey, and I missed my extra by one question. So we'll get that fixed. And it was sort of funny answering some questions in an exam that maybe some of us haven't written in a long time, going, I know I should know this answer. But that being said, let's go forward. Remote HF operation is not so brand new, maybe more in the UK, but I have been doing it since 2005. And a bit of history with me was I live in the city of Toronto. I operate HF, and I noticed that the urban noise kept rising and rising and rising. Actually, I really noticed it even started to rise at VHF frequencies. And I'm fortunate that my XYL has a summer house or a cottage. You call them different things in different parts of the world. We call it a cottage. My friends not far north of here call it a camp, and I'm not sure what you call it in the UK, but it's blessed with internet and a really quiet noise floor. And the difference is almost 25 dB on the noise floor. And that's the difference between being able to hear something and not be able to hear something. So remote operating can mean a lot of things. Maybe it just means I don't want any equipment in my desk, and so I can put it in another room. I could put it in the garage. I could put it at the base of the tower, and what you can do today. And you know what? When you put it near the antennas, you get rid of a lot of feed line, so you get more RF transmitted and you hear better. In my case, it was moving it to a quieter location, downsizing, and Nick, as you said, club station work. As well. 5 years ago, we all went to the club station if we had one. Now we can stay at home and go to the club station. Anybody's ham shack look like this? I see people looking to see what bits they recognize, and some of you maybe yes, but believe it or not, we can replace a whole lot of that and make it look like this in the Flex world. And in the Flex world, by the way, we could do it like this because we don't have to have the RF deck on the counter, on the desk. We can, as I said a minute ago, have it anywhere. ICOM, Kenwood, Yaesu, Elecraft, anybody else, it's probably still on the desk because of that client user interfaces, the classic buttons and knobs and 8-point font and 117 different buttons. But this is actually a true contest station from one of our customers. And if you look closely, you can see this laptop is his client user face. And by the way, just throw the flex head on a bit. You can still have knobs in a regular radio if you want. This is just one of 5 different ways of interacting with the radio, such as a flex radio. This is actually the desk I'm sitting at today. It doesn't look a whole lot different. It's the one I work from all day long when I'm here at the cottage. And the top left, it's equally as messy. But you'll see what's called a Flex Maestro under the display. That's right here. And this becomes my user interface to the radio, which is about 250 feet that way in a boathouse, which is closer to the antennas. And I have an internet connected between here and there. I don't use much Wi-Fi because I find Wi-Fi to be truly evil. It's good enough for streaming movies. It's not really fun to play with in real-time communications. Because I'm a contester, this is I've contested from this desk. It's a stand-up desk, and so in the middle of the contest, when my butt's getting sore, I can crank it up and stand on one foot and push to talk with the other foot. And on the right-hand side is where what my ham shack looks like, where all the equipment is. And this picture's a year old. A number of things have changed in terms of gone to a smaller power supply, but we've got. It looks a little overwhelming. It's not. It's just the key point is these are, I've gotten to different power supplies trying to keep noise down, but we've got 2 web switches here, which do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of turning things on and off, and we'll get more into that. And if you're thinking of building a remote station, I want you to read this very carefully. The radio used for HF today may not be the best radio to run remotely, just like anything. You may own a Porsche, but it's not the best thing to take to the dump with the drywall to get rid of it. It'll do it, but it's probably not your best choice. In the flex radio world, the radio was designed from the ground up back in over 10 years ago now to be operated, I'm going to do finger quote remote, which of course means a different desk outside half a world away. ICOM's one of the better ones, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There are many transceivers available that will do remote. So ICOM 7610, 7300, some of their other units. The Elecraft K4, the K3 will be is a very good remote, but it's an expensive add-on. Yaesu and Kenwood actually had it out a long time ago, and then they never touched it again. One of the things I want to make key here is if you're getting a remote, as in I'm getting out of my house and I need to use the internet to connect to it, you want to make sure that you can do it safely and securely. Every other radio out there, ICOM, Kenwood, Yaesu, Elecraft, does not have a plug-and-play remote connection. Doesn't mean you can't make it work, but it does mean you have to have some networking skills. So terms like either a static IP address, I don't want to scare people with these terms, but static IP address or DYNE DNS, and you need to know port forwarding. Ideally, you need to have a VPN in place to protect yourself from the bad guys so that you're not opening, the ports, which are the doors to your internet, just wide open to the bad guys. So if you're a network person, these are no-brainers. You've done this already for years, no big deal. What FlexRadio did in the remote world is they allowed you to put the radio on the desk, read a couple of pages on the manual where you create a user ID and a password. You hit the foot switch to say, yeah, I've got the radio in front of me, and your radio is automatically registered to a computer system that always knows where your radio is on the internet. So say I'm at Starbucks and I want to connect to my radio remotely on a FlexRadio. You're going to log in from your Maestro, which we saw earlier, or your laptop, or your iPhone, or your iPad, and you're going to put in your username and password. The client, the application, my phone, for example, is going to call to our servers and say, hey, where's Fred's radio? I always use Fred as in Fred Flintstone. Fred's radio, and it's going to say, hey, it's at this IP address, and these are the two ports you need to open or you need to go connect to. We really don't care what they are. And the client end, the part we're sitting at, goes, great, thanks very much, hangs up there, now calls the radio directly on a peer-to-peer connection. So you don't need static IP addresses. You can have what we call DHCP addresses. It actually works on Starlink for commercial accounts where they give you a proper IP address. And all versions of remote fail hugely on a type of ISP internet called CGNet. That's carrier graded NAT. And that's pretty common with some smaller internet service providers. And I don't know the UK, if they provide outside WAN addresses or not, proper IPv4 addresses. But there are people on our FlexRadio community that do that. So I apologize, I don't have the background on that to speak up, but it is something you may need to understand a bit. The whole summary, too long didn't read summary here, is the Flex world's a plug and play world. I could give you my username login to one of my radios and you could be connected in 2 minutes. And I have a video on our FlexRadio site that gets used a lot where it says, hey, my friend said I could borrow their radio. And it's about how I set up, as a brand new person, download the software, log in, and you're connected just like sitting beside it. So let's talk about some radio options. So I already mentioned FlexRadio has their 6000 series and their newly released 8000 series. Do we have any FlexRadio customers at all? Hands up. Nobody. Okay. I'm not trying to make this sound like a commercial. I'm just trying to tell it the way it is. And if I didn't work here, I'd probably say exactly the same thing. So their tool that I just mentioned is called SmartLink. And it's very user-friendly. It's secure. It's as plug and play as it can be done. And then if we move on to the very popular ICOM 7300, in order to use a 7300 remotely, you need to have a PC that the radio is connected to, ideally a VPN, and you'll have to do all those network things I mentioned earlier. The 7610 has a built-in server in the radio, but you still need to park it behind behind a VPN to be safe and secure. And that's with their RSBA1 software. The K3, K4, the Elecraft K3 uses a very popular, sort of the gold standard hardware called a remote rig device where you have special hardware at each end. It's fairly well designed. And again, you should run that over a VPN to be safe on the K3. They have a big control head like our Maestro. And the K4, I keep needing to edit this sentence. This is from back in May. They have just started to release their remote software. I think it's called VK4, Virtual Kilo 4, and not the Australians, the Virtual Kilo 4. And it works really nice. But again, VPN, secure network is required. I've never met anybody that's used the Yaesu LAN 10 thing. I've seen it. I thought of purchasing it to give it a try because I have a Yaesu FT991. It's probably something I should try. Kenwood has some software. It has been out since like 2001 or 2002, and I don't think they've touched it since. But I met a guy 2 weeks ago. He said he still uses it every day, and he's pretty happy with it. But he's a network guy, and he's had to put his own, VPN solution in. There's some other solutions out there. Now, in North America, we have remote ham radio. Have any of you ever heard of RHR? And that is, Phil's nodding his head. So we come to the point where we sell all our ham radio equipment, we take all the money, we put it in the piggy bank, and we rent time from RHR. And it's not the worst solution out there. And by that point in time, we can probably afford to spend a little money. I don't have to solder another connector. I don't have to climb another tower. I don't have to throw another line over a tree. And somebody just keeps it up and running for me and they've got a variety of stations, well over 20. And they've got some in different countries as well. And very popular in North America. It's taken, not a bit of heat, but it's well discussed. And I think it's an incredibly viable solution as we become more and more, downsizing and into smaller places. I don't know much about Remote TX. You can Google that. It's a paid, they have a client server thing and they sell that on subscription. In both cases above, I am 100% in support of subscription software. These guys are trying to make a living as well, generally. So they want to get some money for their time. And usually you get that constant maintenance and updates and integration and more feature functionality. There's a whole the same thing for remote hams is another solution. I think that's the Forb thing. Never used it. I know some guys that like that. Win4XXX, and the Win4 can be Win for Yaesu, Win for ICOM, Win for Kenwood. Is written by a Canadian, which is another client server solution. Again, still requiring to use that VPN, but beautiful integration as well. RigPi was done by MFJ. I believe it was called the MFJ 1234. And that's a solution running on a Raspberry Pi. I never thought it was fully baked. It was close, but the devil was in the details and getting it up and running and reliable. I'm sorry, and remote hams, yeah, I've got it there twice, the RC4. And of course, Ham Radio Deluxe, even from Simon's days, always had this client server thing in it so that you could run a program on the computer at the remote. It would communicate with the radio, and that's how I started back in 2005. I used Skype for my audio. I contested with it. It was, tell you what, it worked well enough, but to get that 30 dB in noise floor back, it was well worth it. And then if you're really ingenious or, you like to tinker, tools like Node-RED, which is an IBM tool, makes programmers out of all of us, and couple that with ChatGPT, it's quite the powerful tool. Dave DeCoons W02X and I wrote an article for QSD. I was in, I think, September, about a year ago, discussing Node-RED. So like I said before, and there's one of your national figures on that slide. ICOM, Kenwood, Yaesu, anything OEM requires a VPN to be safe and secure, and you need some networking skills. None of these are that hard, but unfortunately, there's enough information available on the internet to learn about it. Networking is just like a different phone system, and I think all of us are capable of learning about network IP addresses. Well, that's like a phone numbers. Ports is like, getting a tunnel into the exchange on a different computer, and a VPN and stuff. And there's lots of help available online in many different areas. And if you own a Magic Mouse, if you touch it, it just changes slides on you. So I think I've discussed this all about SmartLink already, but it is a TLS connection. It's a highly secure, connection. TLS is not something that can be busted yet by the bad guys. It's a very simple username password authentication. You can do all mode. And one of the things that any CW operators, if you're a CW operator, and if you love hand sending CW remote is really hard to do. Now, WinKeyer has a solution where you put a WinKeyer here, and I put a WinKeyer way over there, and you make them talk to each other over a LAN. But the WinKeyer listens to your character, so it can be latent. So a letter E is sent to me, if I'm keying away, I send an E. The WinKeyer says, hey, Phil sent an E. We send the ASCII letter, rather E, to the far end, and the radio sends the E. Okay, but now I send a 0. Well, the WinKeyer's got to wait for the 0. It's a lot longer. So it's a little bursty and latent, but that's how that solution works. FlexRadio does it differently. We actually send the timing elements. How long is space? How long is the carrier? how long is the space, how long is the carrier. So if you send like crap, we're happy to execute and send crap out on the air, which, if you happen to be sending with a bug, you don't want that bug feel hidden. And there's a couple of guys that have come up right now with solutions that work for hand sending CW using a couple of Arduinos. They use our timing element technology. It's beautiful. I'm on a couple of chat groups for it, and the guys that are implementing that are having a blast. It directly integrates to a FlexRadio, but he's also got a client server thing where it connects to, can be made to work with any radio. And of course, it's much faster because the latent on the character is only the length of the last event, the space or the CW carrier. And you'd think it would be pretty easy to do. How hard could it be to just sit here even on a local LAN? And I did this as a test with my radio 200 feet away, and I was sending, I hooked up a key so it could measure when the dot and dash was being sent to a keyer 200 feet away. And while technically it worked, it was unusable. It was just the timing didn't work. So this is where the timing elements in CW are so critical. And again, Flex put this in play over 10 years ago. All right, so we talked about some of the technology and some of the radios now. Where do we start? Well, if you're going to do remote, and I'm going to start in the worst case scenario, being you're not going to have it in your house. But remote could also be that I've got my shack here and I'm going to my mother-in-law's for the weekend type of thing. And the good news about that, if something goes wrong when you come back home, you can just reset something if something's not working. But that's also a great way to test things, is walk away for a day and see if you can use your radio. You learn a lot. If you've ever been a repeater operator, you know what this is like. If you're the custodian for a repeater, your life was all around never having to go back to the hill or to the building to fix the squelch. But as we know, sometimes things just fail. Sometimes something needs a power cycle. Sometimes the internet goes out. Sometimes rodents chew through things. Oh, yes, I have that problem. Sometimes your ISP helps by doing firmware updates. And what that means is this happened to me a long number of years ago in the middle of winter, where I closed up our cottage and generally didn't come back for 4 months. I went off the air. So I call my internet service provider, and they were called Cable, and I said, "Hey guys, what's going on?" And they said, "Oh, Mr. Walker, it's no big deal. We've pushed a firmware update out to your modem. All we ask you to do is unplug it and plug it back in." Great, hour and a half drive, one way. So anybody been to Canada? Anybody know what Canadian Tire is? So hardware store, big box hardware store. Stop at Canadian Tire on the way out. It was just after Christmas. Go buy a Christmas tree timer on sale for $4. And this got hooked up that every day at 3 a.m. the power would go off to the modem and come back on. And that got me through the rest of the winter, figuring I wasn't going to be doing a lot of operating at 3 a.m. And of course, you know this phrase, Murphy was an optimist. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Absolutely. All right, so let's think about command and control. We sort of talked about how do you operate your radio. We've talked about the interfaces, but now how do you turn it on and off? How do you turn the AC power on and off? How do you turn the DC power on and off? Do you have antennas? Do you need to ground them? Or do you need to turn a rotator? Now, the simple station may have 1 or 2 antennas, and the most reliable amateur radio remote station has 1 multi-band antenna, and it doesn't have a rotator. So you've just gotten rid of antenna switching and you've gotten rid of a rotator. And that's probably okay. And if you're sitting in your shack right now, look up at everything in front of you and see how much of that stuff do you have to, once in a while just turn on and off, because I guarantee you will. And that's why I had all those relay boards. And of course, you need a location if you're truly remote. No, that's not my station, although I wish. By the way, I did find having a remote watt meter incredibly powerful, because sometimes I want to know if I've got no watts out or a lot of watts out. Now on a FlexRadio, the watt meter is actually a standalone watt meter in the radio. So if it says no watts, you've got no power out. But in my TS480, when I used that, it looked like it was transmitting, and then that's when I purchased an Elecraft W2, and it had a serial port on it, and I'll tell you how I read that later. Let's talk about the internet. What's more important than bandwidth is latency or jitter. And just check with the gamers. They'll tell you all about jitter and latency. But since we do real-time voice communications, that jitter needs to be the lowest. And if you've ever been on a voice over IP call or a Zoom call where it's getting a little long, you notice how you're stepping on top of each other sometimes, and even on a cellular call, it's not so bad till we start to get above 140 milliseconds. And that's something long ago that Bell Labs determined. This is where I've got the square of the box. From my remote, which is in the city of Toronto, to here, this is my typical round trip time of 13 milliseconds. So 13 or 26 milliseconds, 13 milliseconds each way, which is pretty quick. And it's just like, just like being there, as they say. And I want to show you, this is a tool called Ping Plotter. It's free. And I also have a VPN to my remote. I kept praising Flex for not a VPN not being required, but I'm a superstation, so I have a VPN to do other things. I ping, this is from pinging, which is a very simple network command. And this green line is about 100 milliseconds. So we want to keep things down below the green. But a minute later, all of a sudden my network went crazy and I went, what's going on? And it turned out after a lot of research that we're well above that green line. The audio is breaking up on my headset while I'm listening to some HF stuff. And something happened on the network. It didn't consume the network. There was something else going on that was downloading a file at the remote. It might have even been me. I might have initiated a download for something else thinking, I can do all this. I've got all this bandwidth. But it actually did cause my, internet to break up enough that I could hear it. So just things to keep in mind. Not a lot you can do about it. So when we use SmartLink, I always recommend keeping a computer up and running 100% of the time at the remote site. And the reason you want to do this, and it doesn't have to be a PC, but if you're a Mac user, you could do it in Mac, and Linux certainly does this very well as well. The remote PC there's a lot of reasons to do that. That whole PC at the remote site is my ham radio computer. It's got my logging software on it. It's got my, N1MM on it. It's got some maintenance tools, WSJT for digital modes, and all at the remote site. And then I use a remote desktop program such as TeamViewer or AnyDesk or Google Remote Desktop or VNC. It doesn't matter. There's lots of them to communicate with that computer. The reason we want to do this is we keep all the data that we use, especially in digital operation, at the remote site. Because the minute you try to send it over the internet, it is going to start losing some of the data stream. It is going to be somewhat corrupted. You may or may not notice, but you may not decode as much WSJT. You may lose some packets. And you could still do all this without a VPN because understand what I mean by TeamViewer connection is secure, and you don't need a VPN type of thing. And it's username, password, still a very plug and play setup. I think it's incredibly reliable to do it that way. And it's also then easier to share your remote with somebody else. So say your buddy, Barney, wants to log in and use your computer for the weekend, or your network, or your ham radio system. All you have to do is give Barney the credentials for the PC at the remote. You don't have to spend hours on the phone getting him all configured to operate remotely. It's all done. And the odds are he probably knows how to do it. We'll talk about the switch in a minute. So this is what I run at my remotes. These are little IBM Think Centers. They're not very big. They're about 10 inches by 10 inches, maybe a little smaller. I have two of them. There's a reason I use two. And one of them runs N1MM, WSJT, etc. And the other one actually runs a Grid Tracker or Slice Master or which is something we use in the CW world in contesting. And I wanted them on two different computers so that remotely I could connect to them from two different screens and see one here and one here. Works very well. And these cost me about $200 Canadian used. And I pay to put Windows 10 Pro, or lately one of them's got Windows 11 on it now. And I have it runs a little hard some days. I can watch but things going on, but I find them really good. And if something happens to it, somebody steals it or breaks in, I really don't care. This is the Swiss Army knife, and this is the tool that I recommend if you're getting started or for a club station you keep at the remote end. I can't begin to touch on all the features PST Rotator has, but it will handle a rotator. It will handle relay switching, which you can turn into antenna switching or power switching. It has a little web browser into it so that you could actually see the rotator stuff. Say you had a rotator on your iPhone and say, hey, turn the beam. And I found that incredibly useful one day when I was at the top of my tower fixing some bearings. And I thought, oh, it'd be nice if I could turn the beam and listen to this grind. And oh, wait a minute, pulled out my phone, had the beam swing around while I sat there and watched it pretty closely. I was by myself climbing a tower. I know you're not supposed to, but that worked out really well. So highly recommend PST Rotator. It does so much more than I've even mentioned here. And it communicates with just about every rotor, just about with every logging program. It uses OmniRig to connect to radios for frequency and band data, stepper, type of control, a whole bunch of different stuff. So what do you do about lightning? Well, sadly, there is no app that takes the coax off the back of the radio and throws it out the window, puts the radio in the box. So you can, in my case, I use a 403A antenna switch from 403A out of Montenegro. And when I pull the power, turn the DC off of that, the antenna is all ground. It's about the best I can do. They are building, by the way, a mechanical disconnect switch, which will help incredibly. This little black box by Paradan will ground your antenna when you turn the power off. It helps because a lot of the damage is not caused by direct strikes. We see a lot of damage in repairs where, hey, my radio just stopped working. There was no lightning. I was home the whole 9 yards. Nothing happened. And if you anybody use these Alpha Delta arc plug thingies? If you use one, pull the top off and look inside, and you will see pitting on the, from it actually taking static, or from nearby static event, and that can be rain static, wind static, snow static type of thing. These all can produce energy and high voltage. Also, highly recommend you use antennas that are DC grounded. Case in point, generally a dipole is not a DC grounded antenna type of thing. But there are ways to make it DC grounded. My 160 meter wire vertical, which is up a 90-foot tree with elevated radials, is not DC grounded. But I found that if I put 8 windings around a mix 43 choke, and then I swept it, it was about 3,000 ohms through, or 3,000 or 4,000 ohms through 3 or 4 megahertz. So I was able just to put it right across the radials and the vertical part to make it DC grounded. It had no impact on day-to-day operation, doesn't get hot, and it worked really well. This is where you guys get to read this and I get to take a drink of water. That's like my wife calling to help. Yes, you can yell at me later. All right, so what's the easy way out? Thanks to Internet of Things for the rescue. And there are millions of Internet of Things available today. And that allows us to use these things available on Amazon to turn things on and off. Now, personally, I like this Camtronic switch here. They have been very good to me. I had even found a problem with one last week, and they're actually writing new firmware to fix it. I don't necessarily need it fixed, but George there was very helpful. Digital Logger web switch is a very popular switch. They're available. You can, I think, configure them also for 220 operation. They have a web GUI, and if you're technically inclined, you can enhance it to do more things. But if you simply search on Amazon for IoT web switch remote, there are hundreds of solutions, meaning I can turn power on and off from my iPhone. One of my coworkers, Dan, KD7H, he'll be upset if I got his call wrong. He was just on QSO Today podcast last week. He likes these little switches by Shelly, smart, or N7HQ rather. His call sign's right there, and he uses those for a lot of things. They're actually designed to be hidden in light switches to do things, but they work really well in our case. And I like to keep all my apps in one place. So I found this common app called Tuya. And if you look down the right-hand side of the screen, I've got a bunch of them. They're set up in my house. Now, I'm usually home a lot, but sometimes I'm at the cottage for a week or two, but my VHF station is in the city. So it's remote, so I can at least connect to it, turn the beam, and log and do things. It's a cute little app, and it's well supported. It runs on everything. It's free. And when you want to turn things on and off, we actually sell this MH Cozy 4-channel switch. They're like $23 if you want to go buy on Amazon. And in my case, you can see I found on Amazon these Canon connector cables, male, female. If you're not a soldering person, I just wired them in and I tied the ground together here. And yes, that's nylon lacing twine, because I still use it because I love it. And just makes it handy for turning more stuff on and off type of thing. Not very expensive. Come on, change slides. These smart plugs, these are obviously 110 volt ones. I'm sure there's 220 ones in Europe. Not hugely expensive. Again, they all connect to the Tuya app. So now you can turn your power supply on and off. Heck, my friend Lou, N2TU, he walks into the shack, he goes, "Hey, Alexa, turn the shack on," and all this stuff starts turning on just, well, because he can. And of course, he can do it remotely if he wanted to. So you can turn the power on to your rotator, maybe an amplifier, a type of thing. And this is the mess at my home shack. But I took exactly those items you see, and I put in an AC power one to turn the power supply on, which is sort of stuck up here. And then I've got my MH Cozy switch to do a couple of things with the radio remotely. And I can turn my transverters on and off. And FlexRadio's got some smarts to it where you can plug in an inexpensive relay board right into the back of the radio and have it do a whole bunch of unique things, like only turn the preamp on if I'm below 10 megahertz, and then turn the preamp off if I'm in transmit. So as we, every year, the ability to do things remotely is getting easier and easier and easier, and thanks to Internet of Things. So when you're all done, you get the reward of, hey, we get a fun project that you can continue and work. You get in my case, a quieter location. And you know what? If you can't hear them, you can't work them. You get to share your station with maybe you have a shut-in friend, and they'd like to get on the radio. And you know what he can do when he gets on the radio, because he's probably on some. Well, you know what he gets to do? He gets to this joke goes over really well in North America. I don't know, but in Europe, he gets to brag about all the new meds he's on at a whole different level, and which is a joke about being on 75 meters here in North America. My North American friends got that one. You can downsize, you get some new bragging rights, and hey, maybe you're going to make some new DXC countries for your logbook. And case in point, this is me operating remote one day on FT8, and I'm running, believe it or not, 900 watts, or no, I'm 812, a little bit over my limit, but in Canada, I'm allowed to run 750 in digital modes, but that's at the antenna. So I wasn't running that much power at the end of the coax, but I've got, my tuner here, my amplifier control here, my rotator here, and I forgot who I was, Zulu, this China Works Zulu Delta 9 whiskey, which was a new country for me, and a very handy desktop view. And I won't pressure the whole FlexRadio part, but it really does lend itself for doing that very well. You can plug your key right in, or sometimes you just want a quiet place to listen to a net. So I'm open for questions. Come on, play. And that's the view from my tower just over here in January, and that's why it's so quiet. So, and I'll open this chat. But any questions here verbally from the assembled multitudes?
Right, Mike, thank you very much indeed. If you don't, yeah, you've just done it. I was going to say, we'll take down your thing so we can see everyone in the nice gallery view on the screen there. Yeah, thank you very much. Just before I chuck it out to open, I realized myself the power of this when two or three of us a year or so ago were on a trip to local here up in the Pennines to do a new SOTA summit we hadn't done before. And as we were walking up the hill to get to the summit, it wasn't a massive walk. It was relatively small, certainly by North American terms, but it was a fun day, chatting as you do. And he's a club member, but he's not here tonight. Pulled out his iPhone and said, "Oh, let me just show you this, Nick. I can turn my radio on at home, and we can take part in the 2 meter net, or I can get onto HF radio with his iPhone." And yeah, it wasn't a surprise that someone could do it. What I was surprised about was how easy it was to do it. And he was running a bit of software called SDR Control, you've probably heard of, Mike, that runs on the iPhone and iPad. And you can also use it on the Mac as well. And I just thought it was a sensational piece of software. He was using it with his IC 705. And I've got a 705, so I decided to spend, £60 of my money on buying his software, the SDR Control software. And it really is a really excellent piece of software. It enables me to do two things, like you said, Mike, and it's the plug and play bit of it, which is the key to it, isn't it? Really, unless you really love spending your time working through all the problems.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm able to go and sit in my front room and I can run FT8. I can have a sideband contact. I can run CW if I want to. FT8's easier sitting down at the sofa with my wife sitting there watching telly and making some contacts. I can go and do that, or I can run this, or I can run the radio when I'm out of the house by logging into it at home and doing the same thing in such a simple way. And what that struck me as you're demonstrating by running something a lot more complicated, really, and a lot more powerful, is that the possibilities now, because of the internet and because of the abilities we've now got over the internet to control equipment. Yeah, that's it. We've got the ability to do something that we haven't been able to do in the past, and that means that we can set up radio for someone like my dad that was living in sheltered housing for a long time where he wasn't able to have an antenna or a radio, or set it up for someone who lives in what you call in North America the HOA properties, not allowed to put up antennas. Sometimes they get away with stealth ones or magnetic loops, but not much more than that, but would like to run a big beam to take part in a contest. Um, the possibility of clubs doing this and clubbing together to set something up, and that's what I introduced this discussion with, seems immense. So I just want to add to what you've just said, Mike, and put that idea in people's heads here. I know we've got a couple of people in the room here.
Hey, Nick, I
Phil,
wanted to comment on that. So
yeah,
SDR
go on.
control.
Then I'm going to just ask the two guys I know already running
Okay.
FlexRadio what they do. Go on, Mike.
Yeah, SDR control is written by DL8 MRE, Marcus out of Germany. He also writes Smart SDR for Mac and iOS for the Flex radios. I think he's also writing the Elecraft interface. It's probably for the same thing. And so, right, SDR control works on the 705, the 7300, and the 7610 as well. In all cases, those are the ones that I recommend a VPN only because you have to open up ports on your firewall, and SDR control is not a secure login. not to take anything away from what it does. And your friend, your friend probably had that all set up anyway, so that's all good. And otherwise, you do have to open up some ports, but that's good. Anyway, go ahead. What was the next step? Mark's a great guy, by the way.
Yeah, no problem at all, Mike. Yeah. I mean, I'm pleased you know him, and I also happen to know he is very responsive where people raise issues with him that things aren't working. He will have a look at it and make those changes. I just want to say, I know we've a couple of people in the chat. Mike said they already use Flex radios at home. Marek, you're one of them. The other was Phil, G4UDU. Do you either of you two guys want to just come in now with your kind of observations on running radios remote?
Well, I wanted remote back in 2017, 2018. And I was at Dayton, well, I've been at Dayton many times. I was at Dayton in 2018 when the K4 was announced. And of course, it was in my mind, well, here we go, here's a radio, and they say it's going to do this, that, and whatever. And I made a decision then. I want something that works now, not something that works where it's on the idea pad for a few years hence. So I had Flex from 2018 and running remote. And I've set up 2 radio clubs down here with Flex remote stations. One's got a 66 and uses a Maestro with it. And the other one's got a 6400M. They use it both locally and remote. They've just been running, and they've got, as Mike said, the super whizzy Amazon remote turn on, isolate the power, do everything. And those that will isolate the power things have even got some nice little safety things in them as well, where you can, we've got them set up so it will power the station down, because we have it so the station's off unless you turn it on. But even if someone turns it on and forgets to turn it back off again, the remote switch will automatically shut the whole thing down. And we've also got the things on. One thing the Flex needs is, which Mike will confer, is if there's a firmware update or an authentication issue, you have to be able to operate the PTT. Well, that's a right pain when you've got to go running off in your car to plug a mic in the stupid radio to authenticate it.
I'll help you with that one, Phil.
Yeah.
I have a relay on it. I'll tell you what, I have
never. So we've done that, yeah.
hold on. I've never had to use it. As long as you don't change the login, it's never lost registration. Yeah. So obviously I have it because I have to change users. Yeah. But we thought we were going to get a lot of heat over that when they put that in. And it's a security feature, right? Because what if I log into your radio and steal it away from you so you have no control? So that's why we did it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's nice to be able to go click, click, and you've done it remotely. Yeah.
Anyway, it's a very small issue, but anyway, I'll defend that one.
But anyway, so yeah, but I've got the full station here is full remote. I've got everything, antennas, and people never know quite where I am anyway. So I might be here, I might be away, and I use everything from top band through to 70 centimeters, all remote. So I've got various radios, all remote, and but I've been doing it for a number of years now.
Phil, quick question to you. The local radio clubs that are running remote stations, how much are they used by their members, and what's the kind of feedback? Maybe we should ask either one or both of those clubs to come back to the club here sometime and just tell us their experiences of using them.
They are used, they're used not a lot, but there are some of the people that use it are really pleased, because we've got situations where people have moved into apartment blocks who've been HF operators, and that's it, the end of the world, it's finished. There is no antenna going to be dropped out the apartment window, and you're not going to have your HF antennas up on the roof or anything. So now, they're back on. They can take part in nets and things. One of the guys from one of the clubs that Bob on there is a member of checked into one of the 40-meter nets on Sunday morning while he was away on holiday in Amsterdam to take part on the local 40-meter net that was at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. Because he could.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Phil. Marek, you're one of those with one of the older Flexes. Have you done much with it?
Yes, okay. In my case, actually, using the Flex was just curiosity to see how it works. And I was using remotely, but in my local network. As you know, my license conditions didn't allow me to use remotely. So I was using my local network. I was sitting downstairs and the Flex itself being upstairs. And that's it, actually, over. And I was using the smart SDR custom built by the US operator, can't remember, N6 or N9 something software, which worked very well. At the moment, I'm not using for a long time, as you know. It's somewhere in the box collecting the dust right now. Just thinking about buying the new model, but we'll see how it goes. So that's my experience with it.
Okay, thank you, Marek. Right, anyone else with a specific question or comment, particularly to put to Mike, either on here or those watching on YouTube? Who wants to go first? Just unmute and talk if you want to. Yeah, go on, Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Very interesting. I wondered how you manage the Windows update system, because Windows is an absolute pain to me. It's always wanting to update and reboot at the most inopportune moment. You turn off the updates, or do you just have it that power cycle as well?
Spend the $100, buy the Pro version.
Well, and then turn the updates off.
So you can control when the updates happen. We have so much money invested in our amateur stations, and then we cheap out in these things like that. So if it's that critical, I have two things I've learned about Microsoft is you can't beat City Hall. So when the update happens, I just let it happen on my wife's computer and whatever. But probably my entire, since Windows 7 or certainly 10 and 11, I just buy the Pro version. I bought a Windows 11 Pro license last week for $10 online. And then it just says, hey, updates do just, get around to doing it sometime, and it pops up. So for me, it's never been the nightmare. Once on one of those two computers I said I had, I think it got stuck in an update. It did it during the night. And then I couldn't log into it remotely, so I power bumped it and had it, you obviously have to set your computer. So if the power drops and comes back up, you want it to start up. And remote operating of a remote PC, us techie geeky guys have been doing this for 20 years. So it's not unknown technology type of thing. You just make sure it automatically powers up when the power's applied. So it's not been an issue, but you can buy Windows Pro very inexpensively, even on Amazon, believe it or not. So, and
Yeah.
with that, I actually get it with a remote desktop server built in as well.
Yeah, no, we use Windows Pro at work, and it's a right pain in the backside, to be honest.
Work's different.
Well, yeah, but
That's a policy issue.
Well, they're all Pro systems, but they're a pain to turn off. So
that you're not in control of your domain if it's a work one, right? Has it got policies on it? That's where you're.
I'm the admin, so I do what I like. But
okay, well, you should be able to turn them off then, because I don't.
I wouldn't know how you manage it. That's all. But I have to use Windows at work. I don't use Windows at home. I've used Windows at home for 20 odd years, but it's just easier for work stuff.
I can honestly say was it now 20 years of running a remote with a remote PC at the far end, not once, touch wood, has the PC ever let me down. I have lots of other things let me down. UPSs are wonderful for deciding I'm not feeling really good, so I'm turning off all power. More than once that's happened. And I have to run UPSs during the summer just for static. Come about now, although it's really warm here, we've had this great weather in Canada for the last almost 10 days. And we'll probably have a mother thunderstorm come through. Once that's done, the UPSs are removed because I won't have lightning static to worry about.
No, you need a backup to the backup then, don't you?
Well, now you know how the shuttle didn't take off one day.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Anyone else with a question or comment to put to Mike? Everyone's gone very quiet. One of the speakers we had, Mike, a year or so ago from the States was talking about shack in a box for remote DX. And obviously there's slight controversy about that in the first place, isn't there, amongst many people into DX operating. But is that something that you've ever got involved with, or are these guys just kind of going off and doing it themselves?
So George Wallner, who does the RIB and doing the DXpeditions in the South Pacific, has an amazingly smart person. So they've created a shack in the box, or they call it radio in a box. It's actually on a boat with wheels, and they're able to deploy for DXpeditions, saving not only a ton of money, but they're actually getting access to DXpedition sites, to DX entities that we would not be able to get access to if it was a full-blown bring 10 guys, tents, camping stuff, latrine. They don't want that anymore. So the team's allowed on the island for a couple hours every day, but they wheel the radio up. They're on the air in 4 hours, fully deployed with generator, water-cooled amplifiers, and then they go back and they operate from the boat, which is about a kilometer away, remotely. I'm 100% behind that because they're able to put islands and stuff back on the DXCC list. Otherwise, there's many of us have no chance of ever making the DX honor roll anymore, because some of those islands will never be allowed to activate. So you can go read about the RIB, or there's a lot of videos about how we built this. His power supplies his use of supercapacitors in the amplifier, water cooling, and he uses Flex 6700s. Very well done. And so I'm all for it. I don't see a problem with it as long as the radio is, on the island. I can see an argument that moving forward from a DXCC perspective that we should be able to just get close and operate. And Bouvet is a wonderful example. That is an incredibly dangerous landing, and it would not be impossible that somebody dies on that landing trying to get radio equipment on shore. Would it not make sense, other than it appears to have, the boat anchored a mile offshore and them operating from there? Does it really make a difference from an operating perspective, other than, you're not in a tent with winds, 100-mile winds beating the tent, which is even what they saw at Charlie Yankee 9 Charlie 2 weeks ago, and they're only 10 miles from Canada, type of thing. So hope that answered your question, Nick, in terms of radio in a box, because it's a big Pelican case and it's got radio, amplifier, and then they put a battery in the ground, plug it in, and an antenna, and they go.
John.
Yeah, my question quite simple, really. I'm interested in the remote switch on and off very much. All of the apps, iPhone or iPads, etc. Any views on Android?
So we don't, for radio operation, we don't have a Android app. As much as we'd love to, we don't have the skills. And if we were to build it and write it, we would want to make money to pay for it, type of thing. So we have reached out to Android developers, etc., to maybe write their own. The FlexRadio interface, the application interface, is wide open. It's written in plain English. That's how the iOS app got written by one person over a couple of days, type of thing. So there are guys that have tinkered in Android and Linux about writing a client, but they've never brought it forward. And part of the scary part is if I roll out an application for Android, I'm going to be expected to support it if it doesn't work. And yet every iteration of Android is out there, whether you're on Orange or AT&T or whoever, they're all different under the covers. They build their own, they compile their own, and so on. So that's sort of the challenge with Android. But yeah, if somebody came out, we would happily be behind them and help them to develop it. They can sell it if they want, but they also own it to support it. So we just don't have the bandwidth. And to put it in perspective, if you were to come up today with a new radio and decide you're going to build a new radio, say we're going to build a new HF radio from scratch, clean slate. Do you want to know how much money you have to set aside? It's about $1.5 million, and you'll burn through that in the first year, US dollars. But makes sense.
Yeah.
I'd love to have an Android app because then I wouldn't be asked about it every presentation.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Okay. Anyone else with a question or comment they want to put to Mike, or just a general comment on the whole concept of remote operating stations?
I want to know if I got close to the bar since you told me there was a bar.
We've got a very wide range of beers available to you. In fact, one of our members I know was busy fiddling around with his home brewery before we started the meeting, weren't you, Russell? You're on mute, Russell.
So I was in my brewery at the beginning. You're quite right. Moving beer from one keg to another.
Nice.
That would be good to be able to operate from there, I guess. But then I've got to keep an eye on the beer too.
You could just take a Maestro with you and you're in a different room.
My priorities are to get some aerials up. Actually, I've moved here a year ago and still not got around to it. Actually, I do have a question about this remote operating, and that's the audio. Does the sort of software you have take care of, you just plug a microphone into whatever you're using remotely and off you go?
Pretty much. If the Windows in the Flex world, and I guess everybody else as well, whatever your default microphone is in Windows, how you specify your communications headset, that's the microphone we use. Now we've done that just to keep it easy for people to plug in and configure.
Right.
A lot of these ideas look incredibly simplistic, but they're also done from a post-sale support perspective. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Because we don't like the phone ringing. So the same thing's true for on the iPhone app, you can pick your mic input, or on the Mac, you can pick your mic input, but generally it's pretty easy today.
So you actually plug your microphone into the computer, whatever it is.
Yeah. Now,
Okay.
if you're beside the radio, I highly recommend you plug the microphone into the radio. But even today, I'm finding more people than not have the radio sitting here, but they use the computer for all their audio management.
Mm.
Because they want to use, a mic like this.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Yeah, I got the same thing.
Even it is on the worst arm available. This is one of those arms that if you want to move it an inch, you lift it 10 and it drops 9.
Yep.
So.
Yep, I've got one of those just here. It's moving it around is not the easiest.
Yeah, I'll have to get.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, using SDR control I used on the iPad to run CW. You have to use a MIDI controller to plug a key in. It works,
and that's new. Yeah,
it works. But as someone, I enjoy CW mainly. Most of my contacts are on CW. It's not quite right. When I was away on holiday, with my IC705 in the summer, I accidentally ripped the headphone cable out and bust it, and I didn't have a soldering iron to repair it. So I plugged in my Bluetooth earpiece into the 705, and the audio for CW just wasn't quite right. There was just slight enough a delay.
So this is a CTR2 MIDI. It's designed for the Mac.
Yeah.
And I've got to talk to Marcus and see if he's doing CW the way we decided to do it, or if he's using a keyer decoder and sending the ASCII character. I don't know if he publishes it in his documentation, but there's more and more of these it's hard to see more and more of these little things. And when I plug this into my Mac or my iPad, I actually get a VFO knob, I get push to talk just by clicking if I want, and I got a bunch of programmable buttons. Lynn from Lynn Ovations, who makes this, I'll be blunt, I told him he's selling it for way too little, which I think is 69 US. He told me later, yeah, I could have got 99. And you know, and sometimes you're lucky you can market stuff for what it's worth, not what it cost you. And if you've ever been in manufacturing and run your own business, you know exactly what I mean. Yeah, there's another type of switch that'll work, Phil. I think that's similar to the MH Cozy, or it's a new one. Same idea. There's hundreds of them. Anybody else?
Yeah. Any final questions to Mike before we?
Hi, Mike.
Yes, go on, Michael.
Just a quick one. Could you upload your presentation somewhere so we could download it?
Yeah, I'll send it to Nick. I ask that you not publish it publicly, but
Okay.
I'll send it over to Nick.
No, just for personal use to look at it. It's very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good point actually, Michael, because there were some good links you referred to in there, Mike, and it's quicker than having to scroll back through the whole video to find stuff. Yeah, I'm happy to accept what you say there. We won't publish it, but if Mike sends it to me, if anyone wants to have a copy of the PDF, just let me know and I'll ping it across to you to enable you to do what Michael was asking there.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna send it in a second when I remember what your email address is.
Cheers.
Oh, Bradley Nick, right? Okay, I got it.
Yes. Okay. Cheers. Okay, before we sign off, any last questions to Mike? If we haven't, can I give a big thanks to Mike for that presentation? Yeah, good try, Marek. You've seen that in the chat, Mike.
Not on the 8000 series, but we can't still build them fast enough. Oh, excuse me. But if you, well, you need to go talk to Martin Lynch and Sons. And they got a whole update. When did I meet with them? Yesterday. And on the new stuff. Anyway, you should have the presentation in a second. Gentlemen, ladies, thanks for putting up with me.
It was a pleasure, Mike. Thank you very much indeed. Can we show our normal appreciation to our speakers? Thanks very much, Mike.
Okay, 7-3.
Cheers, Mike. 73s to you.
All right, bye now.
1, 2, 3.